stream. That's when I make a beeline for the tree line. That's when I make a beeline for the tree line.
Yeah, it's only the 5th episode review of Chapter 6, and we're already up to a special. Apparently we're getting to them a lot quicker than usual, which is interesting to say the very least, because I think this is actually the earliest in all these chapters that we've gotten a special of SpongeBob. Because I think... Let me take a look back at Season 5 real quick. How long did it take for us to get to a special? It took us until... Where is it? It took us till episode 29 to get a special for Season 5. So, now, here we are again at Season 6, and it's only taken, well, 4 episode reviews. So, aka about, how many episodes? 8 episodes. It took 8 episodes, and now for episode 9 of Season 6, we have a special. So, I mean, props to them for actually getting the special out quicker than usual. I'll give them that much credit. As for the special itself, I do have a lot of nostalgic memories for this one, because my one buddy, Logan, I don't think you guys have ever met him yet, but he is, like, my best bud. I consider him my brother, in a way. He has this DVD called SpongeBob vs. the Big One, and it is a DVD that I have watched several times, not only while I was over at his house, but every now and then when he'd allow me to borrow it and take it back to my place, I'd still watch the ever-loving crap out of it. Like, I'd skip 1 or 2 episodes, because I think one of the infamously terrible episodes is in that DVD, but I watched that thing like crazy. It is one of my most rewatched SpongeBob DVDs, and it's one that I absolutely want to get a copy of my own for my collection. So, I have a lot of fond memories and nostalgia for this episode, even though I didn't see it until weeks after it initially aired. So, because around this time I was done with SpongeBob and I was doing other things. So, it wasn't until much later, when I was around, I want to say maybe a late teenager, that I actually started watching the rest of these seasons that I missed, including the rest of 6, The Abomination of 7, 8, and 9. And it went on from there. So around 2015 I was caught up. Just in time for the second movie, which we'll talk about when we get to Season 8. But anyway, with all that little nostalgic reminiscing aside, is this episode still good? Is it still a good special that I enjoy? Yes. Is it a great special? No, because it has a lot of problems that we're going to do our best to talk about. So this is probably going to be a pretty long and in-depth review because I have a lot to say, but I can tell you right now, this is a very positive review. I may have a few gripes and negative things to say, but it's overall positive, and I do still recommend this special. It just has some flaws that need to be addressed. So let's start with our basic plot here. So the plot is that because it's so hot outside and no one's showing up at the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs comes up with the idea of taking the Krusty Krab out onto the beach, as in it's a cash register, a grill, and a surfboard. And of course, SpongeBob and Patrick. That's SpongeBob and Squidward. And this fails automatically because the first time they get customers, they left their wallet back on the sand, so that's a no-go. Then Sandy shows up for almost no reason. She's very shoehorned in this episode and barely does anything. And then there's Patrick, and that's where everything goes sideways because he can't read the menu, so he tries to get up on the surfboard. But he inadvertently becomes a speedboat motor, throwing the surfboard back towards the wave where Sandy's trying to surf. And they collide, and they all end up getting separated into different places. Sandy gets sent to an island all by her lonesome, with apparently one guy, but we'll get there when we get there. Then SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward, the main trio, end up on their own little island with a bunch of high school dropouts junior college dropouts, excuse me. And then Mr. Krabs ends up alone in the middle of a area that we're going to talk about in a minute. So they're all separated, and obviously SpongeBob's freaking out a bit because, he doesn't know how to surf, and apparently that's the only way to get back to Bikini Bottom, because they are miles away from there, according to Twitch, the leader of these college dropouts, and one of the funniest one-time gag characters I think I've ever seen in the show. And then he, after trying to teach them how to surf, fails miserably, including a really funny scene. It's not a highlight, but I'm going to talk about it. It's a scene where SpongeBob and Patrick are told to go at this perfect wave that finally comes along after they wait a while on the shore. But instead of going to do what they're supposed to do, they jump off the surfboard, go underwater just so SpongeBob can show Patrick a picture of Squidward for almost no reason. It shouldn't be funny, but it's very funny because it's like, oh, what's he boating up to? What is he going to show Patrick underwater that he can't actually show out in the open? He just shows him a normal random picture of Squidward he had in his pocket. It's funny. So that fails, but then one of Twitch's friends, I forget his name, the long beard guy, suggests that he sends them up to Jack Kahuna Laguna, or JKL for short, to actually teach them how to surf because he's like the most amazing surfer known to fish kind. So they get sent upstream to find him, and while they're sent upstream, we catch up with Mr. Krabs, who finds himself in the middle of the Dutchman's Triangle. That's literally what it's called, because there's jelly donuts falling from the sky, there's water spouts of blood, and there's random cumulonimbus clouds forming everywhere with lightning bolts. Or as Mr. Krabs calls it, in the Devil's Galley. Because, he's a sailor, he uses sailor dialect. But it's cool. And I do think that the jelly donut part is actually pretty funny. That is highlight number 1. So, that's the first highlight. Just all the scenes of Mr. Krabs in the Dutchman's Triangle. Including the Flying Dutchman stuff that we'll get to later. So, after that, we see that Sandy ended up on an island far away from the others. Why? I don't know, because apparently she just needed some purpose in the plot. I don't know why she didn't just end up with SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and or Mr. Krabs. But she's just off on her own thing, so she's like on her own little side quest that doesn't even last half the episode. It is shoehorned if shoehorned could ever shoehorn. Like, if you thought it was bad in Atlantis Square Panis, you have not seen it until you've seen this episode. You could cut Sandy out and barely miss anything. So we get that. Then we have a beautiful little serenade that plays while they're going down the stream. And it's called Beeline for the Tree Line. It is a beautiful song. That's highlight number 2, by the way. Which is also accompanied by this just beautiful animation that feels so laid back. It feels so chill. Like, because you have like this little guitar melody playing in the background, and you have the main trio surfing downstream through all this wilderness, and it's so beautifully designed. It looks so cool, and it does an amazing job just giving off like these chill vibes. It's hard to say. If you're a surfer, you'll understand what I'm saying, but it is so chill, it is so laid back, and the song itself is really, really pretty. So, yeah, that is highlight number 2. Definitely the song, and just that whole sequence. Then we come to highlight number 3, which is where SpongeBob manages to find the Kahamuka Cove. Hope I'm saying that right. And, well, inadvertently, he stops to tie his shoe. So they go up to the shack and they meet Jack Kahuna Laguna. And his reveal, for one, is hilarious because it's just this giant surfboard that almost goes on forever. We have the character design, which is way, way more unique than every single design in the entire show. Big, buff fish, but also having like this laid-back vibe. And of course that face with the blonde hair. And of course we have the big thing about Jack Kahuna Laguna, and that is who's voicing him. We have yet another special guest voice actor for this episode. And I can say right now it is leagues better than David Bowie and Atlanta Square Banners. Because here it is Johnny Depp voicing JKL. And yes, he doesn't speak a whole lot in the episode, but just his presence and his tone, it really sets the overall character very well. And I think Johnny himself did a really good job with the voice acting because it does sound mostly like his normal voice, but he does have a little bit of an inflection that actually makes him sound a little bit different than you'd expect Johnny Depp to sound. So he definitely tried to do a little bit of voice acting, but you can tell he's a little bit out of his element. Because I think the only other animated project he did up to this point was, Corpse Bride, I think? So, yeah, he's definitely out of his element, but he is still, really good in this role. It's a role that sounds boring on paper, but then when you add Johnny Depp's voice acting into it, it actually becomes really interesting and you want to learn more about him. Unfortunately, we don't get to learn much about JKL, and that's one of this episode's biggest problems. That has this really cool new character, but we learn nothing about him. So, that's a bummer, but I also kind of like that they kept it a mystery, so it's a double-edged sword kind of thing. But definitely a highlight of the episode. That is definitely my highlight number 3 of the episode. So, JKL starts trying to teach them how to surf, and his ways are a lot more spiritual rather than actual physicality, because he does it in a way where it's subtle, it seems like it's something that shouldn't even work at all, but yet it kind of does, because he plays on the bongos at a fire. Well, no, actually, first he surfs for 2.5 hours, at least according to Squidward's dialogue, even though it only lasts 5 seconds. And apparently that's their first lesson. Then the second lesson is while they're sitting at a fire right outside of JKL's hut, JKL comes out and he starts playing the bongos. For pretty much no reason. And he just keeps saying this catchphrase, just keep breathing. And then this little music note plays whenever he enters and exits a scene. It's subtle, but it's, in a weird way, surprisingly kind of funny when you understand the context. And then, of course, SpongeBob tries to go to talk to JKL after Squidward becomes worried he's going to be stuck there forever. And SpongeBob's response that JKL tells him that he shares with Squidward and Patrick is that they have to stare in the fire all night, and the secret will be revealed. It shouldn't be funny, but it is so funny. Then, after that, we get another little scene of Sandy, showing that she was entirely shoehorned in the episode, because we have one scene where she's pretty much already made a living for herself on this island using her intellect, which I like, but it's just a little one-note gag and it adds almost nothing, which is a shame because it really shows how capable Sandy is of surviving all by herself. And unlike to save a squirrel, it's not a stupid plot twist. But she immediately goes into a helicopter she built by herself, and she takes off. And apparently, she found another person on the island because there's an old man in her tree-built watchtower as she's taking off in the helicopter. I don't know why they added another person in there. I don't know why they thought that was necessary, but yeah, apparently she was actually not alone on the island at all. I highly doubt that old man did anything to help. And then it starts storming, and we cut back to Mr. Krabs, and apparently now he's on a surfboard, even though he was just in the water in the previous scene. And we see he's already gone crazy, with a beard and his shirt all torn up, and he's treating Cassie like an actual person, giving her seaweed hair and clam earrings. Mr. Krabs being Mr. Krabs. And then he accidentally hits the button for the cash register's door, and it ends up smacking the Flying Dutchman in the face. And of course, he's very angry and upset about this. And he even says his one line, like, "Who dares to interrupt the Flying Dutchman on his way back from the grocery store. You even spit me milk! I don't know why, but that line delivery is funny. Seriously, shout out to Brian Doyle Murphy. That is great voice acting, and it takes a line that shouldn't be funny, and it makes it funny. And then, of course, Mr. Krabs is like, well, you shouldn't be that concerned over that. And then, of course, the Flying Dutchman freaks out. Sorry, I may or may not be going out of order. Please excuse me. I literally just rewatched the episode, so it's a little bit fresh in my head. But also kind of not, because I'm also trying to explain it to you at the same time as I'm trying to actually remember it. So, please forgive me for my stuttering and meandering. So, then we get to the part where JK actually talks about the big one, and this is one of the parts that was in the marketing for this episode back in the day, because I vividly remember this trailer where JKL, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward are all up on this temple, this ancient temple building that Patrick calls a giant drinking fountain. Patrick being Patrick. He's actually not bad in this episode, which, again, it's nice to see in an era where he's supposed to be terrible. But anyway, going back away from that, he talks about how there is this truly perfect, gnarly wave called the Big One, and it's the only way that they're going to be able to get back to Bikini Bottom. So, then we get to the big climax of the episode where, well, first we have one extra scene with Mr. Krabs and the Flying Dutchman with a joke that doesn't work. Because it's Mr. Krabs making a promise about how he's not going to step foot in the Flying Dutchman's waters again when Dutchman tries to take Cashy to pay for the groceries that he ended up throwing into the sea because of Mr. Krabs. But immediately he makes a claim saying he claims it on his dear Aunt Sally's false teeth. And this doesn't work for a couple of reasons, because apparently the Flying Dutchman does not know that, knows that his Aunt Sally does not wear false teeth. And the explanation they come to, in what's supposed to be a joke, is that Flying Dutchman apparently knew Great Aunt Sally in high school, and they were a dating couple for a while. This raises so many questions. One, if he knew about Great Aunt Sally, how would he not know about Krabs and act like they've never met before? Number two, how would he remember that his Great Aunt Sally even has false teeth or not after being a ghost for millennia? Number three, how does this tie into Mr. Krabs, at all? Or a reason to take Cashy, or the reason to know that he's lying? It makes no sense, and it's probably the weakest written line of the episode. And yes, that includes the weird seaweed bit that didn't need to be there in the beginning. So, they're still fighting over Cashy, and that's when apparently Cashy gets thrown out of Mr. Krabs' hand because, he ends up in shock of that joke that doesn't work. And the cash register ends up hitting Sandy's helicopter, and the helicopter then bops the Flying Dutchman on the head and sends him into the water. And this is my fourth and final highlight for the episode, because this part is legit hilarious. Probably my favorite joke in the episode. And it is when he sinks down to the bottom of the seafloor after being whacked in the head by Sandy's crashing helicopter. And he ends up in Davy Jones' locker. Like the real Davy Jones' locker. Like the live-action Davy Jones actor throwing socks at him as he's stuffed into an old gym locker. That is one of the funniest, most unexpected, and hilarious cutaway gags I think I've ever seen out of this show. It's so brief, but it is such a cool little detail, and it got me laughing a good bit the first few times I watched it. It is such a funny, funny moment, and it's such a weird cutaway gag that also kind of works. So, yeah, pretty cool little part there. And then we get to the climax of the episode where we see what the big one actually looks like. And it's a little disappointing because it's just a giant wave with an evil face and apparently water hands. In other words, it's kind of like the water with Moana, except it's not nearly as cool. And the big one, the first thing it does is that it eats Patrick's surfboard, and Patrick himself says he was going to eat that later. Which, I mean, they kind of hinted at earlier with him taking a bite out of it during the montage of Twitch trying to teach him how to surf, but at the same time, it's like, come on, dude. Really? You couldn't think of a better line? And then they all end up on SpongeBob's surfboard because Squidward loses his surfboard as well. And they all end up on the wave, and it looks like they're actually somewhat surfing it. And they spot Mr. Krabs, and it looks like Mr. Krabs drowns for a second. And then that's when JKL shows up out of nowhere and brings Mr. Krabs into the fold for almost no reason. And then Mr. Krabs goes to clap along with the other three, and he ends up throwing Kashi into... Well, he drops Kashi into the big one's mouth. So JKL immediately goes after it. Now, JKL has said in an earlier spot, right before they ended up going out to surf the big one, is that it requires a sacrifice and that one of them will not return. Which leads to the unfunny moment of Squidward saying it has to be SpongeBob. Sorry, that is out of character. But JKL ends up becoming the sacrifice, and he goes in to save Kashi. And then that's when the big one's appetite is satisfied, and it allows them to surf all the way home. And apparently, from this one wink directly to SpongeBob, he figures out how to surf, and he starts playing the bongos on the surfboard as they are surfing back on the big one. Weird, but it's also kind of a interesting spiritual conclusion to his training, learning how to surf. But again, since this show follows the status quo, it's not going to follow that continuity. So, bopping Dutchman on the head is the only thing that Sandy actually did that impacted the episode, because she ends up crash landing back on Bikini Bottom without having to reunite with her friends or anything. In other words, really emphasizing that she had no point being in the episode whatsoever. And that's when they all reunite. Apparently, well, at first, all of the Bikini Bottom mites act disinterested. And then out of nowhere, as soon as the actual foursome show up, that is when they suddenly all appear out of nowhere, including Twitch and his group, which, I mean, it's unclear how they even got back in the first place, because they themselves said that they don't set foot off the island. Stupid. And they're having a party, and that's when JKL shows up. Yeah, the wave didn't actually kill him, making that entire little bit of dialogue pointless. He gives back Kashi, and they dance, and that's the end of the episode. So, it's definitely haphazard, it's definitely uneven, it definitely has a lot of problems that plague a lot of modern SpongeBob. But, at the same time, it is enjoyable. It has a great laid-back, chill vibe. I love its beach aesthetic. I love its surfing ideas. I think JKL is a cool one-off character. And it is still a really good watch. I do think this is one of those episodes that you can just turn on and vibe to. That being said, though, like I said, this episode has a lot of problems. There's some weird writing in a few spots. Sandy has no point being in the episode whatsoever. You could have cut her out and not miss a thing. Like, you could have easily had something else come back and hit Dutchman in the head. Like, you seriously could have. Then the whole Aunt Sally false teeth thing does not work and makes no sense. The final act is rushed. Like, I could go on and pick apart this episode, but honestly, the more I think about it, the more I actually come to like it more than I question it. Like, it has a lot of things that don't work, and, I mean, including the fact that, the fact that all the characters are treated as if they're just now meeting for the first time. Yes, the show follows no continuity, but I know for a fact that they have a lot of episodes that all of them actually know each other and are actually friends. Somewhat. So for them to treat this special like them all meeting for the first time again, outside of SpongeBob, Squidward, and Krabs, is very, very strange. Especially like when Sandy and Patrick show up, because it's like, Dude, you know these people. Especially you, Krabs. You've met these two numerous times. This should not be new for you. So that part made absolutely no sense. And it just rushes through a lot of things, and that's kind of the episode's biggest problem, is its pacing. Its pacing is all over the place. And some parts it's working pretty well, like all the scenes with JKL were pretty good, and I think the pacing there is solid. But then you have stuff like the whole Dutchman's Triangle thing that is rushed to high heaven and barely has any bearing on the plot whatsoever. And then, like I said, there's haphazard writing. This episode has a lot of problems, is what I'm saying. But because of its laid-back vibe, because of JKL, because of its cool aesthetic, because of its really nice song, its nice animation, and the fact that it is still an entertaining and enjoyable episode despite all these flaws, I'm still willing to give it a positive rating, because while this may not be a great special, it is still a very entertaining and enjoyable special that I do really like, and like I said, I have a lot of nostalgic childhood memories with it because, well, my buddy Logan has the DVD and I watched it all the time, so it's always going to have a piece of my heart, even if it's not one of my favorite specials in the series. So because of that, I think SpongeBob SquarePants vs. the Big One all rounds out to a final verdict of a solid, but not very great, unfortunately, 14 out of 20. That's going to put it into the good range, and it's almost great, it's borderline great, but it just has way too many problems, and again, Sandy did not need to be in the episode. You could have cut her out and not miss a thing. Just like you could have cut out Plankton and not miss a thing in Atlantis Scorpanus. So, yeah, it's a little bit of an uneven episode, but, I mean, it's an uneven review for an uneven episode, so I guess it fits. I do recommend this episode. Just go in with your expectations at good, not great, because the episode itself is not great. It has its fans, and I understand that, and it got one spin-off game on the DS that no one talks about. But outside of that, it was purely a ratings trap, but it's one of the better ratings traps of SpongeBob's history. So, yeah, that's going to do it for this long-winded, uneven, but positive review of SpongeBob vs. the Big One. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this almost every single day. And I'll see you guys next time when we continue SpongeBob on Chapter 6 with the next 2 episodes. And they're 2 very good episodes, so we're done with trash for the time being. So join me next time when we take a look at A Life in a Day, a criminally underrated gem, and Sunbleached. 2 episodes that are on the same DVD as SpongeBob vs. the Big One. So that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. We cannot take it anymore. The time has come to go. Prepare, we're ready for